Hello, Taylor. Thank you so much for joining us and dripping some knowledge for us today. So, first off, how did your SEO journey begin?
Oh my gosh. Well, so glad to be here. My SEO journey, I guess, technically really began, when I was a pretty young kid because I've always been into computers, always been interested in the internet and how it works and how it kind of works within, our daily lives. So everything from like the entertainment side to the local business side, and obviously the social networking side. I've sort of started to pay attention to people's behavior online from a very young
Mhm.
age, but more formally so when I started pursuing a marketing degree at Palm Beach Atlantic University, and then really came into focus when I started here at Digital Resource a little over 5 years ago.
So you were always curious, right? That's always so interesting as like the internet's evolving and how what it's become into the monster that it is today. I'm sure that's like it's just so crazy to see it, watch it, and just watch it really become our
Right, yeah.
new network, our new like commerce. Everything is now
hmm
online.
Yeah, exactly. And I think back in the day, I was influenced by like those cheesy spy movies, and I thought I was going to be like the hacker man breaking into the mainframe, and it's really not quite quite like that in real life. But I still do really enjoy the idea of being, um, faster, smarter, etc., than any competition in the market. And it's the cool thing to me, and we'll probably get into this a little bit later, is how a small company can actually compete with a big company online, if they're really smart and strategic on how they go about what they do.
Yeah, and I love that being able to leverage what you have. And
hmm
let's before we dive into that, yeah, let's start in the basics, Taylor. I'm going to pick your brain, and I really want to
Sure.
understand what is SEO, right? Like, what does it actually mean? There's so many different definitions out there, and it's just
hmm
such a big topic, right? So, really
Yep.
describing what is SEO and why is it so valuable?
Yeah, great question. And there's so many different ways to answer that, but really starting with the absolute basics for anyone who may not know, it's SEO stands for search engine optimization, which is the process of getting a website to rank on Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, or any other search engine higher than their competition. And the main way we look at this is through keywords. So, not there's a finite amount of space underneath the Google search results for any given keyword, right? So let's just take a keyword like, say you're a dentist and there is a city that you're in. So, for here, we're located in West Palm Beach. A keyword could be dentist and then West Palm Beach. And that would be the same as, dentist near me, etc. But ultimately, it's someone looking for a product or service in their area and the location of where they're looking for it. That's local SEO. And then on a more national level, you wouldn't need a location indicator, and that would be typically more big business. Typically, going to be products that can be shipped anywhere around the country. We do work with a little bit of those companies as well, but primarily we work with local businesses who are looking to compete, more so in the city that they're physically located in. So SEO is fairly complicated in terms of how it works, but it can be broken down into a few items. So you know has to do a lot with your website, how your website was
Mhm.
built, and how your website's maintained, the pages and the content on your website. But it also has to do with how other websites are pointing to your website. When I say pointing, I typically mean linking to your site. So if you are Google, this is a question I like to ask when I speak to people who are really green to the subject. I'll be like, what if you were Google? How would you know who the best dentist in town was, right? And it is
Right,
a head scratching question because it's like that's not something you think about every day. So
right.
what I like to explain when I'm kind of going through the basics of SEO is that Google in and of itself is just a robot algorithm. It's not a real
Mm.
person. There's no secret man behind the curtain deciding who wins and loses. So they've written a very complicated algorithm that actually works a lot like based on reputation. And reputation is essentially when someone else says this is a, and I'll just stick with our example for this is, this is the best dentist in West Palm Beach, and let's just say it's a website that ranks people. So there, BuzzFeed, for example, there's lots of articles that, maybe say the top 10 best dentists in America, let's just say, hypothetically speaking. If a website was to say, you know, number 3 on the list is, Dr. and again, hypothetical, Dr. Bob Smith, who's in West Palm Beach. And then in that, they linked to that person's website. Well, Google actually crawls all those articles and understands that that means other people are giving them a vote of confidence by saying, they are essentially, a dentist in West Palm Beach. And not only that, but they're a good one. So we look at trying to get multiple websites, directories, even podcasts and things like this, to point to our clients or even our own website if we're working on our own stuff, to say, well, what industry are you in? What city are you in? And can we have your site talk about that? And that,
Mm.
in the industry, we call that authority. That is another website lending you authority so that Google can say, well, out of these 10 dentists in this city, this dentist keeps getting referred to by other websites, other magazines, other videos, and therefore they must be the most reputable dentist in town, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of, it's a very in-depth topic, but that's sort of the surface level, how one website ranks above another.
Which makes total sense, right? I mean, to really
Mm-hmm.
break that down, it's you have, in order to build authority, in order to
Yep.
build that recognition, you need multiple sources to state it, right? To
Mm-hmm.
kind of validate what
Correct.
that is, to really give that validation to
Mm-hmm.
say, and then Google can scan it and be like, oh, they are reputable. They are a legitimate business that is ranking for that. Is that
Mm-hmm.
kind of more of the authority in a sense of building that
Yep.
repertoire and making sure you have enough content to really validate it?
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's that is, kind of the tough part of the game is, how do you find people who are in a related industry, but are not direct competitors, and get them to, say nice things about you on the internet, right? And,
Right.
and sometimes it is easier than others, and, sometimes we have to get really creative with how we reach out to these websites. But it's, the bigger the website, the longer that website has been ranking online, the better it is to get a link from them. So,
Mm.
each site has what we call like a domain authority score, scale of 1 to 100. And the higher that score is, the more a link from that website is going to benefit you. So the very, very generic example I always give is like if the New York Times wrote an article about you and said that you're the best at whatever you do and put a link in that article back to your website, that is my idea of like an ideal backlink, because that is a very, very highly authoritative website that is sending you traffic. Now, for most of our clients, that's not a super realistic thing to hope for. No matter how good they are at whatever they do, for a publication like that. But that doesn't mean on a micro scale that we can't replicate that with local, newspapers, local businesses, industry journals, industry articles, things like that. Is typically going to be some of those really coveted links that we try to get for our clients.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like how you said earlier too, Taylor, you were talking
Mm-hmm.
about how it is bots just scanning and how to really think about how you want to be found, right? Like
Yep.
what do you want more of? What do you want to do more of as a business?
Yep.
And really thinking, how do you want to be discovered? Taking those steps back are really going to allow you, it's almost taking the emotion out of it, but then you've got like reviews that'll kind of bring that back in. But
Mm-hmm.
otherwise the emotion's not there. It is simply strategic. It is simply
Yep.
making sure that if you want to show up for something specific, don't overthink it. Just be standard, like, and figure out what those keywords are or what those identifiers are when you
Mm-hmm.
search for Google. If you were your customer or your
Yep.
patient, what would you want them to look up, right? What would you want
Right.
them to find you for?
Totally. And I talked a good bit about linking, but you can't overlook content too. You have to, if you want to rank for something on Google, you have to write about it,
Yeah.
you have to have that on your website, and you have to, have your expert opinion out there for the world to read. So the old days of SEO, and people who've been doing this for a little bit longer will know this. The older days of SEO, we would just kind of spam keywords all over a website. I'm the best dentist in West Palm Beach. I'm the best dentist in West Palm. Every other sentence would say that. And we know, as professionals, that that's not really good for people to read. And fortunately, the Google algorithm has evolved a lot over the last few years, and that type of strategy is no longer as nearly as effective, and it actually can be detrimental. So, as their algorithm gets smarter and smarter, they're actually understanding the human language a bit more, which is a little scary, but,
Yeah.
and they can tell the difference between a really well written article and some gibberish that you threw together. So nowadays, putting out, good 1,000-word articles on your website is a really good way to show Google, hey, I care about this topic and I'm actively contributing to the dialogue here. And that typically does reward, with good rankings, when Google gets a hold of it. But you asked earlier, it was kind of a two-part question. You said, why is SEO valuable? And I
Yes.
think that's a really important thing to look at, because um, in a lot of ways, businesses don't even understand fully how much Google often contributes to their sales revenue and their bottom line. I'll give you an example. I was on a trip with a few of my friends, and we flew into Salt Lake City, and we were going skiing for a few
Yes.
days, and a couple of us needed to rent gear, right? So as soon as the plane landed, I'm with like 5 or 6 friends. I pull out my phone and I Google, snowboard rental near Salt Lake City, right? And
Mhm.
immediately, the maps show up, and I pick a place that, I think it was the first or second result on the map, and I was looking for a place right near the airport so that when we were done, we could drop the stuff off, right? Um, but one thing leads to another, and this is why I say businesses don't often realize how big it contributes. So I'm with let's say 5 of my friends, and only a couple of us need to rent anything, but all of us go into the store, and all of
Mm.
us, every person there bought something. A few people bought their lift tickets for the week. A couple people got like goggles and a helmet. I rented a board that day, and I think another friend did. I being the SEO nerd that I am, after when we were driving away from the store, I said, just out of curiosity, how much did each of you spend there? And when we tallied it all up, our group as a whole spent over $1,000 in that store. And the only
Wow.
reason we were ever in that store to begin with is because they showed up on Google when I searched it, right?
Oh, that's
So
such a good
and
example. Yeah,
no one
yeah.
in the store asked us how we found them. No one in the store said, "Oh, oh, did you see a commercial or something?" No, it wasn't like that. So when they do their books later, they're going to see these purchases, but they're not going to think, "Oh, this came from Google," right? So
Mm.
there are ways to track it, and if we, get into really in-depth SEO conversation, we can talk about tracking and reporting and things like that. But on a surface level, that's what I mean when I say most businesses don't realize just how much SEO can make a difference for their business or not make a difference for their business. They could be missing out on tons of foot traffic or website visits, and not even be realizing it because that's not something they've invested in.
Right. Which makes a really good point, Taylor. That example is spot on. I think it's just natural for everybody to pick up their phone, Google what they need,
Yep.
and like da da da, da it's
Hmm.
there, right? Like that, whatever I need is a few words away that I can just type in, and it's this
Hmm.
natural thing that I'm saying. It's nothing strategic. It's just as simple as what I need, where
Yep.
I'm at, and how I can get there. And I like how you said too. It was part of your drive. Like you had to make sure it was easy, right? You had to make sure
Hmm.
it was simple. And I'm sure you hit directions. I'm sure it took you right there. If that even was a break, that could have deterred you from actually going,
Hmm.
because,
Yep.
any kind of complication is like, we're done,
Right.
especially our
Well, and you
generation,
and you
right?
have
We're
to
like,
think
we're done.
in that area, there must be easily 50 or more, like ski shops that I could have gone to. But
Right.
the only reason, it wasn't a big mystery why we chose that one. It was simply because they showed up at the top of the search results. So that, example can be applied to quite literally any business, whether it's B2B, B2C, whether it's a product, whether it's a service. Naturally, unless you get a recommendation from a friend or family, that is almost always going to be your first place when you're deciding where am I going to go to spend my hard-earned money.
Absolutely. So let me
Hmm.
ask you this. How long will it take to rank, and how do you get to that first page? Because I know after you're out past that first page, it's hard, right? There's a lot more
Right.
competition.
So that's really the $1 million question, and anyone in this industry that can tell you an exact answer is probably a little bit full of it. Just to be frank with you. However, we can make some smart estimates based on the industry, the competition level. And one of the factors that we don't have a ton of control of, but it should be mentioned, is how long your website's been online. So, if it's like a nationally competitive campaign, like let's just say, like tax relief or something like that, it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's not even going to be a few months kind of a thing, because first of all, there's going to be, hundreds probably of companies with large budgets who have been working at trying to get on the top of Google for quite some time. And there's probably sites that have been up for 15-20 years in that space.
Right.
So not to be discouraging, but just to be realistic, you have to look at what is the total marketplace and how big of a factor you or your client is in that space, and then kind of start to make some estimates and assumptions based on that. So, for example, if your website has been online for 10 years, but you've never really made an SEO effort before, you're already way ahead of the curve in terms of how quickly, in theory, that you could be ranking number one for some really good keywords. However, if you did just decide to launch your website, last week, well, you've got a bit of a road ahead of you, and the best time to start is still now, though, because it's not going anywhere. And this authority and this history of your site that Google is looking at is is something that really is valuable and takes time to build up. Now, that being said, I don't want anyone to be discouraged, though, because you can still outrank your competition even if your site has been on the internet like for less time, and even if you are a smaller business than your competition. You just need a really, really good strategy, and you need to kind of build that authority quicker than would naturally occur just on your own.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, you need a little bit of patience, though. SEO, it's
Sure.
long-term game, right? But it's
Yep.
worth it. You've just gotta have a good strategy, and you have to be patient with it developing
Mm-hmm.
over time. But there's strategies and different ways that you can really ump the ante, so to speak. But otherwise, it is a patient game, and it's
Mm-hmm.
worth it because once you hit that first page, ha ha ha, business.
Yes. Exactly. And for anyone that might have experience with like Google ads, pay-per-click ads, you would know that you can get to the top of Google very, literally in a day or so, when you
Right.
make your account. But the thing is, you have to pay to be there. And as soon as you, turn that faucet of funds off, you will instantly disappear, right? So, Google Ads is a nice little supplement for someone who maybe doesn't have the patience to wait until the SEO gets them to the top of the list. However, we believe, and we've seen through studies, that only about 20% of the population will click the ads. A lot of people know that those are ads. They see the little ad symbol next to it.
Yeah.
So you really want to go after the big piece of the pie with that 80% who's going to click, first, second, or third most likely result that comes up. However, if someone is looking for short-term ROI, that's a good, sort of in between strategy to bridge the gap, get some short-term ROI to fund, your longer-term SEO efforts, which should establish your business really, really well for the long term. But
Yeah.
we've seen time and time again businesses where their entire business was radically changed just by being at the top of Google. It really makes that much of a difference.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this, Taylor, because obviously it does make a difference. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
it is something that people need, and as long as they're patient and they can go through that. But I
Yep.
think what it comes down to is typically the first page is the only way people actually track if it's successful or not, right? They're like, oh, I'm putting all this money into it.
Right.
And it is cost effective more than ads typically, but then it's organic. So
Mm-hmm.
the longevity of it is a lot better gain, like we were talking about, right? It might not be instant. It is over time and it stays like
Mm-hmm.
that. But how do you know that it is working? And how do you prove that it's ROI? Is it just by, oh, I made it to the first page?
Mm-hmm. Well, no. So, something I like to kind of jokingly say is that clicks don't pay the bills, right? So just because you're
Mm-hmm.
getting people to visit your website doesn't mean you're making, money, and doesn't mean that if you've invested in SEO that you're making that money back. And that's why, right from day one of an SEO campaign, picking the right keywords is really important because, you don't want to just rank for anything. You want to rank for, the product or service that you deliver, and then in the city or state or town that you're, doing business in. So, tracking ROI is also kind of, one of those $1 million questions, but it is very doable.
Yeah.
It depends greatly on the business though. If I'm determining return on investment for a place that sells hamburgers, that is very different than return on investment for a real estate agent, right? So we got to keep that in mind. For an example more so like the real estate agent, it's a little easier to track because if you're, getting a inquiry on your website and that person ends up buying a house, you can really quickly and easily sort of associate ROI there. You as a real estate agent make X number of thousands of dollars on a sale, and
Right.
that lead came from the internet, right? So you can track, of course, like the leads that come through your website, whether it's through like a live chat agent or through a form submission. If some businesses do prefer like to put a little tracking on their phone calls. That's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
tougher, because if you're a local business, you're typically going to want your actual phone number on listed on your website and on Google rather than a third party tracking number. But you can, of course, train your staff to ask, "Hey, how'd you hear about us?" And if they say, "Oh, I found you on Google or I found you on Bing," that's always a good way to do it. But that's a little less scientific. That's a little more just pen and paper asking the right questions. Um, Really, you can look at on a more on a more macular scale, how much business were you doing in this month of last year and how much business are you doing in this month of this year. Now there's of course a lot of factors that can play into that. Certainly the pandemic is one of those factors. Maybe if you've evolved your services, your staff has had turnover, or you've hired someone, maybe that was fantastic that you didn't have the year before. So you got to keep those things in mind. However, if you haven't changed anything drastically, and last year, you were getting, X amount of walk-in or random, traffic, phone calls, things like that, and then you compare that to this year, and if it's drastically different, that's something that can sometimes be attributed to SEO. Whether it's a big drop off or whether it is a huge increase, right? Because SEO works both ways. Maybe you naturally were number one for a long time and you took it for granted, and then your
Yeah.
competition invested in that and stole that number one spot from you. Well, you might see a significant drop off in business, which I can imagine is very frustrating for a business owner. But if you're looking at it scientifically, that's how you compare. You look at, what is the difference, and simply put, you can look at the number of traffic you were getting in any given month or year or quarter, however you want to measure it, and compare it year over year. And I'm really harping on the year over year, because if you compare, April to June, it's not always a fair comparison. Here in Florida, we have snowbird season. It's the weather gets not so great in the summer, and there's different aspects to that. Whereas maybe somewhere up north, it's a spring or summer activity, and it's not comparable between months and seasons. Now, if you haven't been working at it that long, 1 month compared to the previous month is a decent way of just looking at, are we making gains, are we losing ground, etc. But if you have the ability to see year over year data, that's when you really start to paint a picture of like ROI and am I making my money back. Now, another area where you can prove ROI a bit is with a CRM, a customer relationship management tool. That
Mm.
will more
Yes.
accurately tell you where your where your calls are coming from, where your clicks are coming from, where your leads are coming from. Not only where your like leads and clicks and calls are coming from, but who actually at the end of the day makes a purchase and how much revenue is associated with that purchase. That's why when I work with a business, I get really excited if they already have a great CRM strategy in place, because I know the tracking is going to be much easier than having to come
Yeah.
in and train their whole team on how to track, where their sales are coming from. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's really just about how much business did you get and where did it originate? Was it a referral? Was it from a lead from the internet, or was it something else?
Love it. Love it. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm,
just to clarify too, with a CRM, that's your customer relation management tool. So that's really going to
mm-hmm,
make sure that you're able to track where leads are coming from, like you said.
mm-hmm,
And it allows you to follow up and give those 7 to 10 touch points after the fact, that somebody acted on whatever you have out there online. So if they filled out a form,
mm-hmm,
if they clicked a button and it prompted them to fill out their email address, it gives you some kind of instant gratification and allows
mm-hmm.
you to really continue that relationship, even if you're not physically having to do it. So I love CRMs, if you can't tell, Taylor. I love them because I don't know how people live without them. They are an automation
Yeah.
master, and it's a gold mine.
Yep.
But
So yeah, we used to joke that, like pen and paper was kind of the Stone Age, but nowadays really
right,
just like even spreadsheets are kind of
a
Stone Age to me.
spreadsheet. You're so
Yeah.
right.
So, you
That's
really, because
perfect.
that's not, automated into your website and into your sales sites, sales funnel. So you're really, there's a lot of manual labor that comes with tracking on a, let's just say a spreadsheet or pen and paper, where there are really great tools. There's like HubSpot and Salesforce. Those are
Yes.
some of the more high end, bigger business ones. Even Digital Resource offers a CRM. If those tools like Salesforce and HubSpot are a little more than what our clients need, we do offer a kind of a more sleeked down, easier to chew CRM. But if you are one of those very intricate businesses, a solution like HubSpot might be the best solution for you, which is a
Yes.
much more advanced system.
And either way, they have amazing resources too to like learn
Yep.
about the capabilities that any CRM could potentially build
Hmm.
up to. But I'm glad you mentioned that. Another thing I want to go back on too is just not only the traffic that people can get, but we never want to miss the quality of people that you're getting. A lot of times
Hmm.
you think I don't know, I feel like there's always a constant stigma out there that it's like, I need more, 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 more. Not
Hmm.
necessarily. If you have better, if you're really strategic about your strategy, you can actually have a better quality
Hmm.
patient or customer, right? So I think of dental because I know dental really well. But it's that idea of like, yes, you can have those hygiene patients or those price
Hmm.
shoppers, but you can also be more strategic. Do you want bigger cases? Do you want
Sure.
implants? Do you want to have
Yep.
full mouth restoration? Have
Hmm.
more verbiage out there, have your SEO strategy based on that. So you can really make sure you're not only getting, to your very point, increasing production over a year, but like to how to do that, it doesn't mean you have to see more people. It also can
Hmm.
mean you could get people that have more quality, that are going to be more loyal to you, that are going to refer out. Or to your skiing example, right? Like if you want to have the full equipment, I don't know skiing as well, but if you have the full equipment and you want to get your skis and your goggles and there's everything, and maybe there's a kit that you can get with it and you want to sell that, promote your strategy to be more about those bigger cases, those bigger services
Yeah.
that you can offer to have that quality and get there faster.
Yeah, and that's a good point you make because, especially in smaller towns across America, there's going to be a finite number of searches for any given
Mm,
topic in a single month, and that goes back to where we start these campaigns, which is the keyword research. So we'll look at, does this search have 100 searches a month, 500 searches a month, 1,000 searches a month? Because we want to make realistic projections here. If you're going to be number one, the number one result on Google for this search, that means at best you might get 100 clicks from that search. And even that in a scenario where it's 100 total, it is a pretty high bar to set because some people are going to click the second result, some people are going to click the third result. But you want to be strategic about the keywords you go after, because just like you said, you as a dentist, you might be interested in high value cases like a dental implant or something like that. Well, if there's only 50 searches a month in your small town, you want
mm,
to capture as many of those as possible, because between the 4 or 5 other dentists in your town, everybody's going after those cases. And every month, there's only going to be 50 or so to split between you and the other offices in town. And we all know in business, it's not an even split. It's there's winners and
right,
losers. So, we
right.
typically see whoever's the top three results on Google to be the winners, and everyone else is, scrambling for it, or, maybe paying to be at the top, like via Google ads. But that's why, it's important, like you said, to know it's not always about more, 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 especially on a local business. It's more about, how do I capture a bigger chunk of the market share?
Yes. Oh, how do you be competitive? I love it.
Yep.
Like, how do you
Hmm.
compete? Because that's always the intimidating factor. If I'm small, how do I compete with the big guys?
Yep.
Strategy. You
Yeah, and
always think about it.
I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks this way, but I, personally will look at someone having a top result on Google as being trustworthy. Now, I
Yes.
know from working in this industry, some people just got really lucky, but others, have invested in that to get there. But ultimately, that means they've had their website up for a long time, and Google, trusts them enough to put them at the top. And even though, like I said before, it is a robot algorithm, it's a very, very smart robot algorithm, and
Yes.
Google's self it works in their own self-interest, and their self-interest is to get people to the best result possible, where they're going to get the happiest, best service, or the exact product that they wanted or needed, because that means the next time they need something, they're going to ask Google again and again and again. So
Mm.
you kind of want to put yourself in the shoes of someone who would be like an engineer at Google and what they would care about. If you really want to start thinking about how do I beat my competition out? What do I do that can, show this algorithm that my website and my business is better than the other guys in the area?
Yeah, being genuine really is what it
Mm-hmm.
comes down to, right? Like really think about your end consumer and how do you outsmart the bots? It's not about outsmarting, it's about actually understanding what your end user wants, how they think, and what they're going to look for. It
Mm-hmm.
comes,
Well,
I don't know, it kind of comes
that's a good way to
from a
look at it,
genuine
because
standpoint.
Google's yeah, that's a good way to look at it, because Google's updates recently have been all about user experience, and have been how
Yeah.
much time are they spending on the page? Do they
Mm.
call you when they go? Google actually knows that. Again, it's kind of creepy when you start to learn more about it. They know if you clicked on the top link, if you visited the website and left immediately, or if you spent 5 minutes looking through every page and then ended up calling. And if that's what happens, then they know they have the right person at number one. If they
Mm.
see that every time people click this link, they leave immediately, well, that website is going to get deranked because it's not engaging the people who are searching for that keyword. So, besides some of the more common things you're going to hear, like how many visits did we get and how many leads did we get, things like that, you also want to look at factors like how much time are people spending on my website, how many pages are they going to, what's my bounce rate, things like that, because Google's certainly aware of it, so you should be too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Especially with Google. Like it's smart. You just gotta, but to your very point, it has its own agenda, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
to make sure their end users are benefiting and
Yep.
going to them as a reliable source.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, exactly. So let me ask you this, Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
If I know there's like a lot of different marketing approaches out there, and we've talked a lot about SEO. We've kind of talked about a wide range of things, right? So thank
Yep.
you for letting me pick your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think so many people love the digital resource approach to marketing?
So, one thing that we definitely pride ourselves in, actually two things, is that it's super customizable and it's a results driven approach. So, we're very proud that we don't lock people into long-term contracts. That's kind of one of our first things, because we do believe, that's a proof in the pudding type system. Now, we try to be very upfront with everybody. If let's just say you're a local business, could take 3 to 6 months before you start to see a significant increase in traffic and rankings. For a nationally competitive business, could be 6 months or more. However, regardless, you're still on a month-to-month agreement with us, because we want you to see the effort that we're putting in and the difference that it's making to your website and ultimately to your bottom line of your business on a month-to-month basis. And that, is one thing that really sets us apart. The other is, I think a lot of companies would say this, but we truly do it. It's we customize it to your business. We don't run the same game
Absolutely.
plan for the ski shop as we do for the dental office, right? It's a unique approach that has to do with getting links and getting content in that industry specific links, getting placements on whatever journals, or whether it's like a academic journal, or whether it's a simple magazine website or something like that. It's all about finding natural fits. So we're going to look for keywords. Not even every dentist is going to have a similar set of keywords. Some are going to be focused on general patients, and are going to be focused on cleanings, and others are going to be focused on implants and braces, and others are going to be periodontists and orthodontists and all sorts of different verticals. So you really want to approach it from day one as a blank canvas, where it's what is in our client's best interest. And some people have plenty of one type of business and they're trying to expand into another vertical. Others are seeing their competition invest in these things, and they're wanting to protect themselves from that. We've been number one for years for this, but if we lose that spot, they've identified we might be in trouble. So looking at what your competition is doing is a good way to look at it. But
Yeah.
really, it's customizing it, and it's not locking anyone in long term, because we don't the last thing we want is for someone to feel trapped. We want to work with people who
Yeah.
are happy to invest in this because they see the return on investment. And I've just always not been a fan of locking people into something long term, because that way it keeps both sides honest.
Right. I
Hmm.
love that. And it's just the idea of it's a relationship.
Hmm.
It's something that you do want to work on. You want to make sure that there's trust there. And
Hmm.
I think it proves how confident we are in what we're doing is like, yeah, do
Exactly.
month to month, like
Hmm.
that's totally fine. We know what we're doing works. And at the end of the day, we just want to help. So if there's some kind of value we can add to any business, I think that
Hmm.
it's such a good point to make sure we're month to month, and that we are giving that validation and saying like that's how much we believe in it.
Exactly. And if someone let's say they've saved up, a bit of a nest egg or war chest, however you want to say it, to invest in something like SEO, that's great. But what if you need short-term ROI to justify the SEO investment? Then
Right.
we'll work with, our clients on, okay, maybe we run a Facebook ad for the first 3 months, and that will drive, 50, 60, 100 leads a month, depending on the business and on the industry, of course. Um, to supplement, that your business while we work on getting someone the number one rankings across the board. And the long term goal is almost always to have eventually be able to turn the paid advertising off. We don't need
Yeah.
to be cutting a check to Facebook and to Google every month. They have plenty of money. They're doing just fine. Um,
Love
but if
it.
we could, one of the things that to me is one of the most rewarding aspects of what we do is when someone is getting a significant amount of inbound business every month, and they're not paying anybody besides us a dime to get them there. I think that's really cool not to have to worry about paying, these marketing channels for preferred placements and things like that, because you're just naturally solidified as the best, option in, this industry or in your town or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Ha- and it comes down to it's allowing to focus on what you do best. So, and
Hmm.
that's all we live and breathe, right? It's like making
Exactly.
sure that we understand. So,
Hmm.
as it changes, it's such an intimidating industry. We totally get it.
Yep.
And that, which leads me, Taylor, to, like if you could advise any of these businesses that are just starting off with
Hmm.
marketing or overwhelmed by marketing,
Yep.
where would you tell them to start? What advice would you give them? Because you've worked with clients for 5 years and you've just really been able to simplify and
Hmm.
help them understand. So I love hearing that side from you.
Yeah, so the best advice I could give is that trends come and go, and social media platforms come and go. What's cool on the internet is sort of always in flux. But your domain and your website, you own that as a business owner. So the time to start was yesterday, and the next best time is today. There's really no substitute for kind of getting after it. Really, intentionally looking at your website and saying, who do I want to reach? Who do I, what message do I want to communicate? And how do I start, being a part of that conversation? And of course, social media channels and things like that are great tools to help there. But at the end of the day, your website is your platform that you own. And when you, invest in your website, you're investing in your own business, and just because it is this piece of digital thing that isn't as touchy feely as some other investments, it still can be that home base for you to direct your customers, future customers to, and to really control it fully. And that's something that I get excited about. It's like, I can't fully control the things that are on Google. I can't fully control the things that are on Facebook or YouTube, but I can fully control my website. I can make it the coolest website in my industry, and I can add new content every week if I want to. And that, no one can take away from you. So, I often hear people, hesitant to start because they don't have a fully developed plan quite yet. Well,
Mm,
you'd heard it from me. You can hear it from me. Just start. That's the easiest thing you can do at this point. And it'll come together down the road. And companies like us are here to help if you're looking for guidance there. But if you have an idea and you want to turn it into a business, or you already have a business but you haven't invested in the website yet, start immediately, because it takes
absolutely.
time. And you're even if you throw up a very brief little information about you and a picture, and that's it, that's better. You can fix it 3 months down the road from now, but nothing can replace that your website has been registered for 3 months, right? Or 3 years or 30 years, because those are ultimately going to be the websites that are often at the top of Google. And then we can come in and help, get people to the top a little faster than they normally would. But ultimately, just start and get your website up and keep working on it. Because Google sees that. Google sees you working on the websites. Google sees the improvements, and it will, ultimately reward you for those efforts. It might not be today or tomorrow, but down the road, you'll be glad you started, a year ago, rather than sitting and waiting for the perfect moment to present itself.
Absolutely. It's going to evolve. It's the engine to your
Mm-hmm.
marketing machine. You have to
Yep.
have it. You have to make sure it'll be the best that it can be. And then
Mm-hmm.
you'll have a new idea and then a new trend and you can fix it
Mm-hmm.
then. But you're totally right. Making sure you have that online presence that you're
Yep.
able to control, which is your website, having that
Mm-hmm.
big call to action for them to call you. And just to clarify, too, the content that you're saying to be updated, that's blogging, that's making sure that the
Mm-hmm.
verbiage on your website is relevant, the photography. We love
Yep.
professional photography of your team, your office, your
Yep.
patients, not some models out in California, right? Like that, we want to make sure it relates to people, to your
Absolutely.
viewers, and showing off
Mm-hmm.
your business. That kind of relevant content that's always up to date is what you have control over. I love that, Taylor. That's so crucial. That I think it's
Mm-hmm.
so basic in a sense, like, right, like everybody knows they need a website, but not everybody has a website, and they have a presence on Facebook or a Google page and they think that's enough. And you're absolutely
Mm-hmm.
right, you need more control over what that marketing is. So that's
Yeah.
a great tip. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Taylor, thank you so much for joining me today and letting me pick your brain. It has been amazing
Absolutely.
to get your expertise. And thanks everybody else for tuning in. And if you want to learn more about how to rank on search engines and have Taylor and our team help you at Digital Resource, go ahead and visit our website at yourdigitalresource.com. Bye, guys.
Thanks for having me.